सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen though.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो, सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Each spring, as figs ripened, a small army of gamblers, thieves, kings, sex workers, fruit sellers, bakers, and cooks all emerged out of the enormous emptiness of the Taklamakan desert. Whoever is in need and makes pilgrimage to this blessed tomb and enlivens the place and makes the pots boil and makes the lamp burn and gives prayers and praise, an ancient devotional text promised the people, their needs in the world and in the afterlife will be satisfied. They are busy not with making pilgrimage or circling the shrine. Historian Rian Thum has recorded a pious Kashgar author grumbling a century ago, but with their own professions and businesses. For them, it is the same whether they get into a Chinaman's court or a shrine. Across centuries, shrines and festivals like this helped cement the identity of the Uyghurs, the Turkic Muslim people who inhabit China's Xinjiang. Then early in this century, the shrines literally began to disappear. Late in 2007, when Thum tried to visit the Urdam Padshah shrine, he was blocked by police who told the scholar there was something secret in the desert. The Imam Asim Ali shrine near Hotan quite literally vanished, satellite imaging showed. To some, the policies of the People's Republic of China in Xinjiang, banning the hijab and other displays of personal religiosity, restrictions on seminaries, demolitions and harsh sentences, might seem like a model for how India ought to deal with its own conflicts over identity and Islam. Instead of bringing about integration though, China's policies have devastated an entire people and built a despotism, laying the foundations for generations of hatred and conflict to come. Earlier this week, a report by the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights charged China with using state power to systematically obliterate Uyghur identity. The government of China declined to share figures with the UNHCR, but its report points to expert estimates that 1 in 5 ethnic Uyghur across Xinjiang was subjected to detention in 2017-2018 alone. Torture of prisoners immobilized in so-called tiger chairs, as well as sexual violence, were endemic in the camps, UN investigators were told. The camps were designed by China as production lines for patriotism. We were forced to sing patriotic song after patriotic song every day, one former prisoner said, as loud as possible and until it hurts, until our faces became red and our veins appeared. Xinjiang's mass incarceration program targeted individuals suspected of having extremist sympathies. Long beards, refusing to watch television, or wearing certain kinds of clothing can invite prison sentences. In one bizarre case documented in a report for the UN by the researcher Behram Sintash, the Islamicate dome of the Bahar departmental store was first concealed under a purportedly less Islamic-looking octagonal structure and then removed altogether. Even though the Chinese government insists it is committed to bilingual education, UNHCR investigators record the existence of documents urging schools to teach only Mandarin in primary, elementary, and middle school. The Chinese government, in its response to the report, dismisses the allegations as lies and fabrications. The response asserts extraordinary measures were necessitated because terrorists carried out several thousand attacks in Xinjiang from 1990 to 2016, in which, I quote, a large number of innocent people were killed and several hundred police officers died. Faced with a growing jihadist movement, the argument goes, China was left with no option other than re-engineering their national culture. Like much propaganda, this story is notable for its omissions. From the late 1950s, millions of ethnic Han workers began to arrive in thinly populated Xinjiang, mainly to work on roads and infrastructure of strategic value. Economic growth across China later led to a sharp increase in investments in Xinjiang, particularly in the 1990s as part of government-driven modernization plans. From 2000 to 2009 alone, fixed investments in Xinjiang added up to 1.4 trillion yuan, or more than 200 billion US dollars, more than 80% of which was government provided. This tidal wave of cash also ended up growing ethnic religious tensions. Xinjiang's booming cotton industry impoverished the aquifers on which local farming depended. Educated migrants found it easier to get high-paying jobs. Local business elites were displaced by new settlers. And the Uyghurs were reduced to a minority in their homeland. For many Uyghurs, expert Graham Fuller has perceptively noted, the new skyline of their capital Urumqi was, I quote, not a symbol of national pride, but of their ethnic and religious humiliation, and as a monument to their own ultimate displacement. Ever since the early 20th century, Xinjiang had been influenced by Islamist movements in southern and western Asia, led among others by the Indian-educated Han Weilang. The demographic and economic crisis faced by the Uyghur ended up empowering the religious right wing. In 2009, large-scale ethnic riots broke out, with knife-wielding mobs beating and killing 197 people. A suicide bombing followed in 2014. In response, the government unleashed Hard Strike, its crackdown on the Uyghur. It followed a secret speech by President Xi Jinping, where he urged officials to act without mercy. The Chinese government claims its policies are a success. Ever since 2016, there has been no terrorist violence in Xinjiang, and the government claims that the last internees graduated from re-education camps 3 years later. Large-scale repression in Xinjiang, however, shows the regime is still anxious. Large numbers of Uyghur jihadists have appeared on battlefields from Syria to Afghanistan, and China knows they could one day return home to the restive province. Led by drummers, processions of tens of thousands used to assemble at Urdam Padshah shrine each year to mark the martyrdom of the first Imam of the Shia faith, Ali ibn Abi Talib. Flying flags borne from their hometowns, the great processions would march towards the shrine using music, dance and chanting to lead their members into ecstatic states. Swedish diplomat Gunnar Jarring observed, I quote, the crying and wailing in the honor of the holy martyrs, with some disdain. Religious fanaticism, he snorted. Scholar Rahile Dawut offers this alternative reading. For vulnerable peasant peoples beset by drought and hardship, she noted, the shrine was the only place which, quote, can protect them from disaster, where they can pour out their innermost feelings, where they can seek cure for diseases, where their souls can be saved, as also a place they can seek pleasure. Little clarity on exactly why Chinese authorities began their campaign against Xinjiang's shrines. Journalist Alice Su has noted that even political Islam has been tolerated among the ethnic Hui Muslims elsewhere in China, with neo-fundamentalist magazines and teaching circles flourishing on the fringes. The reasons might be rooted in politics. The Hui, unlike the Uyghurs, have never sought national independence, and their leadership has been studiedly apolitical. Few Hui clerics, one activist told Su, are concerned with the jihad or the supernatural, focusing instead on questions like, is your iPhone 6 or 6S? What kind of car are you driving? The wrath of the People's Republic, Rianthum has speculated, might have descended on Xinjiang's shrines and mosques simply because of their potential to mobilize large groups of people, not because of a specific ideological problem. Like it has in Tibet, the Chinese state might well succeed in crushing Xinjiang and leveling its identity. The brutal realities of demography and police power mean there's little possibility of a genuine threat to the state ever emerging in the region. China's victory isn't without its own consequences though. The tools the Chinese state built and honed in Xinjiang will have consequences for all of the country's people, helping the government suppress the most basic democratic freedoms. Efforts to eliminate Uyghur identity, moreover, haven't led to integration or equity. They made a desolation and called it peace. The classical Roman historian Tacitus wrote of the victory of the imperial legions over tribal Britain. Xi's triumph in Xinjiang will likely be remembered in the same way. I'm Praveen Swami and I'm National Security Editor of ThePrint.